And
peace out.
Fireside Palaver, episode 27. This is the second half. Part two, right. Yeah. 26, part two.
26, part two, 27, whatever.
Because this is the second half of our conclusion of Wolves of the Calla. It was just too big. It was too much to put into one episode. So we decided to split it up into two. But I think it's good this way because this, we're at the point now where we're at the confrontation of the wolves. It's like the last chapter of the book, and then the conclusion,
and the
epilogue. So I think it's a good. I think it's a good way to divide it up. We were trying to fit too much into one, probably.
Yeah, there's so much that happened. Like it's this book is kind of like that slow burn.
Yeah,
and you get to this point, and now happens, it's just like,
yeah, it all happens at the end. So just before the episode, we were talking about our weeks because intentionally. I said, okay, let's get together tomorrow and do the last half of the episode. But I just had such a crazy, would have been Monday. Right. I got to work. And so we're coming off of Thanksgiving break and I'm not even at work yet. I joined a meeting from my phone because, I'm always rolling in like 10 minutes after or whatever. And there was a meeting right at 8. The very first thing I hear is they're talking about this project that I didn't even know was this week. I thought I had a few more weeks. And not only is it this week, there's like people that are like on site today trying to install something that I was supposed to have ready. But it's not just me. I'm the backup on this project, right? There's a project. Right. There's supposed to be a team. Like essentially, have you ever had like a school project where you work with a partner and then like you find out way too late in the process that like your partner's not doing anything?
Right.
And it's all on you to do this. That's basically what happened. It would be as if, Eddie Dean has been working with the townspeople of the Calla, for all of this time. And then the wolves show up and Roland's like, oh, I wasn't expecting them. I wasn't expecting this. Like, what? That's today? Oh, shit.
Oh, no.
So I was busy Monday, Tuesday, and what's today? Thursday? I guess Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I was busy with that. And it finally settled down today. So I was back to normal. But yeah. So
yeah,
I'm sure we've all been in that situation before.
Oh, yes. Oh,
so confronting the wolves.
Confronting the wolves.
This whole book is a build up to this climax that finally, happens in the last chapter. And even the last chapter is a slow burn. I kind of expected that the chapter before last would be the one where like the wolves show up. There's this Western like center of the town face off between the tallest wolf and Roland, right. And a tumbleweed rolls by, and then the chapter ends and the next chapter picks up and it's all the battle and that's the conclusion. But no, this chapter it picks up and the group is like traveling on a very nostalgic Western style set of stagecoaches.
I know, right?
Roland is in the front coach with
Oregon Trail.
Yeah, very dysentery-esque.
Very dysentery-esque.
And Roland is sharing a seat with
before that though.
Yeah.
One thing, what do you think about so you've been hearing Roland, he's had a plan, but they haven't really discussed it. And then he gets up in front of the town and he spins like this great tale about
that's right.
how the wolves are like zombies.
And that's right. That's right.
And he tells them that they have to hit them, that there's this thing in their chest and they have to shoot them in the chest. And then they face things just like this before, so they're not worried.
Yeah.
And, like he tells Slightman, he's like, oh, I got a job for you. And it's just crazy. So now you kind of know what Roland's thinking is. It's like, number one, he knows that it's just the only people, even the Ryza ladies still don't know the truth about anything.
That's right.
They know what Roland just said was that they got to hit their chests and all this stuff. And so basically he's spinning this lie for everybody. Because one, they know that Slightman and Andy are the bad guys. And so they want to make themselves look as foolish and as unprepared, I guess, as they possibly can, just in case. Like, you know, who knows if Andy can communicate or anything like that. And they, you know, so, and then he tells Slightman that, you know, hey, I want you to be, you know, kind of like a backup to, I forgot what the lady is that was going to be with the kids with the plates, but he's like, I want you to be their backup, and like Slightman's, you know, kind of happy about it. But yeah, it's really cool. Like this is the first thing where the whole plan is, you know, like the A-team. I love it when a plan comes together. It's all coming together.
I forgot about all the lies and stuff. And Roland has some quote too about he used to hear his father say, like, first there's the congealing, and then there's the lying, and then the killing, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And then you also have the second lie. One, I mean, there's several lies, but I guess the second part of the big lie, which would be that they tell Andy that they've brought all these weapons from their side, and they have these boxes.
Before you get to that, you're right. There's so much more to this. I completely forgot about. So the lies, whenever they're at the town hall, and Roland tells them that they're zombies, you got to hit them in the chest and all that stuff. Who all is in the crowd that would know that that's a lie? So we know that
the grandpa knows that's a lie.
Yeah, grandpa knows it's a lie.
Yes, and he goes along with it, which is really cool.
Right, Eddie knows it's a lie. Probably Susanna, and the whole quartet basically knows it's a lie.
Right.
And who else? Oh, well, Andy must know. Andy thinks that it's wrong.
Everything, he thinks that they're wrong, and Slightman does too. So like,
and Slightman,
and that's the whole thing. Like, they want them to think, you know, we're just a bunch of country bumpkins. Like, we may act like we're gunslingers, but we're actually not very smart, and you know that's going to get us killed. And so it gives Andy and Slightman kind of that false sense of like security.
And it definitely seems like something that Andy would believe, and that whatever Andy believes, Slightman can be coerced into, you know?
And the thing with that is, and it kind of gets into the whole, you know, the Deus Ex Machina kind of stuff. Like, Andy, they know Andy's going to believe it because Andy's conceited. Yeah. And like, he's with the whole laughing with the eyes thing, and like the way he talks down, and especially with Jake hearing how Andy talked to Slightman in the Dogan, like, they know that, you know,
he wants to believe that he's clever enough. He's smarter than these humans.
And that there's no way that they could pull one over on him with these boxes. So like, you know, I guess Andy and one of the other big Calla folk, some big guy went out with them. They're counting on that because they're counting on Andy's over, like, I don't know, like, not, I guess he is kind of confident. So maybe overconfidence that he's more like, he's smarter, he's, you know, more clever. And that, you know, so basically what they tell him is there's these 3 boxes of all these guns, and they're like stored in the outhouse where Callahan lives. And they need Andy because, you know, he's strong, he's a big robot, and that he can like move these things, and they want his help. And they know that it's more than likely Andy comes out there and will destroy the weapons and probably, or maybe even kill Eddie and whoever else gets in his way along the way, because the next day is the wolf day. So like, at that point it's, you know, whatever. But so Andy does. So like, Andy comes out.
That conversation though between Eddie and Andy, where finally Eddie kind of gets to say a little more to Andy than he normally would. Right. Because, you know, they're just kidding. And up until this point, he has gotten a little bolder, but he actually confronts Andy with the question of like, well, who would have programmed you to not help us, you know?
Right.
And also he's like, he like kind of coaxes Andy into helping them by being like, oh, his program won't allow him to do that for sure.
Right. Yeah. He'll never do this. Which is, we may have talked about this in previous episodes, but like Andy's character is really different because like that part, like who programmed him, who did this, and the fact that that kind of never occurred to the Calla folk. Like, how does Andy, know about the wolves if he's been here longer than the wolves have been coming and things like that? And also, like, why he will not help do certain things, which, like he'll babysit or, he'll do cooking and doing things like that. But like, if you like, he's a big robot, like, why wouldn't they go, hey, you could help us with the wolves. Like maybe you could fight them or help fight them.
Yeah.
And that's against his programming or, doing anything that may in some way, in a bigger way, help the Calla he suddenly can't do. And like, like, why does that never come up kind of thing? But that's that, and the fact that, and sometimes it is the outside looking in kind of thing where you're in that situation for so long that it just never occurs to you. And then some outside eyes look at it and, it's a glaring thing, but like, most of these Calla people have grown up with Andy, even like the older people, like Andy's always been there. And it's just, maybe 200 years ago or whatever, maybe someone did question that and Andy dealt with them or something and, kept that on the DL. But either way, like, they're using Andy's conceitedness and overconfidence to lure him out to this place, which previously Roland had asked if they could add a lock to the door, an outside lock to the door, the outhouse kind of thing. And you didn't really know what that was for, but now they're bringing Andy out there and get him inside and lock him up is what you're thinking. Now, my question there is too, Andy's supposed to be like a 7 foot or bigger robot and has massive strength. How long was he going to actually be contained in this outhouse? Like, and I think it was, and the way it played out, I think they always knew that it was a temporary distraction almost, like, because it was, you don't know until it happens. But so Andy gets out there and they're like, oh, they're in there. They're in the outhouse. Just go in there. And like he gets to the door and Eddie pulls his gun and shoots both of his eyes out.
Yeah. I think it was always planned to happen in that way, in some way. Yeah.
Because beforehand, like, you know what's coming. And so that was, for me, I was always thinking, man, they're going to lock this big robot in the house. That seems like a weird plan. Like, and then when he shoots his eyes out, you're like, oh, okay. But like, so they do, and, Eddie gets him in there, he shoots his eyes and, Andy goes crazy, like, oh, my eyes and like all this stuff. And then like this crazy siren thing starts happening. And basically they've got to, I don't know if Andy may have had like a self-destruct thing, if that's what this thing, like what's going to happen? Like, he's a nuclear robot essentially. So like, is he going to detonate? Like if they don't give him the password? And then Eddie is 100% confident that he knows the password. That's either 19 or 99. He's got two chances essentially, which was weird too. And I was going to ask you about this part. I didn't put it in the notes, but whenever the Andy's in the previous like interactions, he'll say like, what's the password, Eddie Dean or whoever? And they'll say something else like, you've got one more try. And so in this scenario, Eddie, he calls him by his like official robot name or, all that stuff. And he says the password is 19 and it's wrong. And he says it's 99 and it's wrong. Now, the way I got it was you only had two chances.
Yeah. I've heard other people talk about this.
And so then he says 1999, which is correct. But in theory, going by the previous things, yes, he shouldn't have been able to say 1999. So I don't know. I don't know if that's just a writing error or if it.
No, I've heard. So the explanation that I've heard is that because he had a third choice, that's how Eddie knew that it must start with 19. oh, 1999. Because when he said 19, he wasn't completely wrong because it did start with 19. And
That's a good
so
point.
yeah, so because it's like I'm trying to think of there's certain sorry, my squeaky. Yeah, essentially, I can't think of an example of something similar, but yeah, he's putting in the. Let's say you were putting in a pin code to a door, and it whenever you hit a wrong number, it would go like essentially he
Right.
said 19, and he didn't get a mac, but Eddie said something like that was an incomplete answer or something like that, and then he guessed 99, got a mac, and then he said, oh, well, there's a difference between starting with 9 versus starting with 19, so it must start with 1999.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, I'll take that.
I heard
That's
that
a
on
good explanation.
I heard that on a few different reviewers, and it makes sense to me. Yeah, I think
that makes sense to me.
I think there might have been a clue to it also in the earlier part of the book. Whenever Eddie tries to guess his password the first time,
Right.
he probably tried 19 because at that point in the book they were saying 19. I don't remember.
I remember that. That's the part where he's taking a dump in the woods.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I can't remember. He says you have one more chance, but I can't remember what he did say. I think he may have said 19.
I don't remember. Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, like he.
Oh, but I don't know that Andy was going to self-destruct. I think that Andy was just basically like going to keep destroying shit until he. I mean, I think he had he blew his eyes out. And he just lost his mind. He was just on a rage, and he would have stayed on a rage until he killed everybody or whatever, and then giving the command and forcing him to shut himself down is that was just kind of the way they ended that process. Which, by the way, how did you feel about the scene where he's like trying to plead with him, like Andy's like, oh, you're so mean, like you're making me shut myself down, like that I won't exist anymore after that. I won't have enough power to be powered back on. This will be the end of my existence. And Eddie's like reminds himself of all the kids in the Calla that had been ruined. And so he's like, yeah, I don't feel bad about it.
No, not at all. And I mean, that's how it should be, because, and it shows you another dimension of what Andy is, because he does have self-preservation and not just in a mechanical way, programming way. Yeah. Which again brings the whole, consciousness and all that stuff.
And it could be that Andy was never programmed to not talk about the wolves, but he just knew that like the people of the Calla think I'm a robot, and so I'll just go with that excuse whenever. Yes. Obviously he has free will.
I've always thought that as well, that like he uses that as an excuse. Like if someone said where the wolves come from, he probably could have been like, yeah, they come from, over here in Thunderclap and the building and blah, blah, blah. But like, he's just like, no, I'm going to play with these people. Yeah. And does it. So, but yeah. And, the other factor of that is if they wouldn't have guessed it, yes, he could go on a rampage. But I also think he would be able to go back to the Dogan, and I would have to imagine there's some spare parts somewhere. Like, so, not necessarily like a whole thing, but, eyes or something.
Yeah, he could probably get fixed. Yeah.
Right. I'm sure he could fix himself in some way. So, yeah. And so they take him out. And so that's the end of Andy. And, again, it's very, very, very loud, what he was doing, like the siren and stuff. So, like, that while Roland is off at the town hall doing his thing, and all these people are gathered, and Eddie's over here doing his thing, they hear it. Like, they have to hear it. But, no one, that kind of brings itself up on the Day of the Wolves, which, like you said, they gather together, they get all the kids in all these different wagons to go to this place, and Roland and Slightman are sitting together in one, and Slightman kind of looks over to Roland and says, how long have you known, or something to that effect. And, Roland kind of gives him the glance back, and he's like, for a while kind of thing. Like, and it was that, because when the siren went off and Slightman heard it, he knew the jig was up then, because if they had figured out Andy, they had to have figured out him. So rather than wait, he broaches the subject, and then Roland kind of like lets him have it in a way, but also,
that would have been the day before though. So he.
Yeah, well, it was the night before with Andy.
Yeah.
And so like, Slightman knew at that point and slept or didn't sleep or whatever the night. Right. He knew that what was coming the next day.
That's just what I was thinking about, is like Slightman having to go all night knowing that he's probably going to die tomorrow.
Yes.
That everybody's going to know. Is the whole town going to find out that he's a traitor? Right. You know, is his son going to find out? Man, there's a lot of torment there that it doesn't really dive into, other than the mention of it in the conversation.
But yeah, like the one thing, so there's two parts or two things that for me stood out in Roland and Slightman talking. One is that Slightman, this is one of those like things you see in movies and other, but where like you get this exposition that kind of like explains a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And this is that part. So like he explains a lot of behind the scenes things that you knew nothing about, you'd heard hints of. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that Roland's reaction is completely different than what Jake was worried about. Like he was thinking, Roland's going to just kill him or like whatever. And Roland basically is like, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not even going to expose you.
Well, he gives him two questions.
Yes.
And he says if he answers those questions correctly,
he'll live, essentially.
Right. And we as the reader, because he doesn't, even his internal monologue, we don't know what the answer should be to these questions. So when Roland asks and then Slightman answers, which the one I can remember is, would you have killed
Jake?
Yeah, would you have killed Jake? And he says, yes, I guess I would have. But that was the answer that led Roland to believe that he's telling the truth in this moment, Right. Because if he had said, "Oh no, of course not. We loved," I would have had to kill Andy, Yeah,
exactly.
Then Roland would have been like, "Okay, so you're still lying to me,"
Right. And it worked. I'm trying to remember the other one.
Yeah,
too.
What was the first question? I could think of it if I really think about it.
But yeah, like and like you understand, like I mean, you're a dad now. I'm a dad. Like, do you understand the protection kind of thing aspect of it? Like, I'm doing this because he is my only son, and like they were going to take him if I did not do this. And Roland's like, he's like, yeah, but you also accepted glasses. You also did all, it wasn't just that. Like, you also did it to get materialistic things out of this.
So here is how Walter White is like Benny Slightman.
Right.
Walter White's excuse in the beginning, and it probably was partially true at the start, was that he was cooking meth and selling it so that he could build a future after he died of his at the time unborn or just newborn daughter. And that may have been the seed, but then he became enthralled with the lifestyle and with the gains of it. And, what may have started as that just cause, became something completely different. Right. I mean, and Slightman, all he has is a pair of glasses as far as Roland knows. But, it was kind of a similar situation. Whereas maybe
Walter White was Walter White. And when he was Walter White at first, he was doing this thing. And then Heisenberg came out.
Yeah.
And Heisenberg liked the thrill and being this guy that was like, like a big to do and things like that. And he liked the money.
Yes, Slightman didn't have a Heisenberg.
Right.
That's the rewatch podcast we should do right there.
I know, right? I was trying to look and see if I can find it, but anyway, so he does. He's like, he hits home with Slightman. He's like, you're right, kind of thing, blah blah. But like, so he starts spewing like all this stuff about what he knows. Number one, he knows that there are these people called breakers.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
they're telepaths and psychokinetics, and that they're bringing one of the twins over, and they're basically drawing something from their brain to make some kind of meal or food or supplement or something for the breakers.
The brain food is what he said.
Brain food to boost their mental powers.
Yeah.
And the breakers are essentially there. There's 2 beams left holding the tower.
Yeah.
And the breakers are using their psychic powers to bombard the beams to try and topple them, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing. Like,
yeah. And to this moment, there's been no introduction of the breakers, right? This is the first.
No, this is the first you've heard of.
The first we've heard of them. One thing that I thought was interesting about this in the book, and I'm trying to think of the time period whenever. It goes way before Stephen King was ever born. Like since the 1800s, there's been lore and like urban legend of people that would like absorb the essence of children to either gain like everlasting youth or just some other that is like a story / conspiracy urban legend that has just branched through all of time, even recently with like adrenochrome and all of this stuff,
Right.
And so I like that this has like kind of a tinge of that same that same thing. But yeah, the breakers. So I feel like if the breakers were the vampires, then I think Slightman would just call them vampires because these people know what vampires are. So yeah, I think the breakers is a whole new thing that maybe the next books are going to have to deal with. Yeah, it's a whole new thing. I don't know. Are they in the movie? Are they in the movie
Yes.
The Dark Tower? Okay. So I kind of think I might remember from that.
But again,
yeah, no, I'm not.
Don't take anything from that movie because what they are doing is not what the book is doing. Because in the
I don't even remember. I just think if I might have heard the term before, that might have been where it was from, but I don't even remember it.
That was, and I'm pretty sure they call them breakers, but it was completely different. Like it was, it was just weird. But yeah, so like he tells them this, and again, what their purpose is. Then he tells them that the guy Finley Ortega, who you heard over the radio, is actually a Tahine, which I don't know if you remember the Tahine. That's
was that the bird dude?
Yeah, he sees the guy at the very beginning in the first book in Gunslinger. It's a human with an animal. Not necessarily a bird. A lot of them are birds, but yes, a guy that has an animal's head with a human's body.
Okay, so that's funny because I remember that from the first book, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, this is going to be like a thing that's going to keep happening in these books, and it never happened again. We never ran into another bird, or I guess animal man.
Right. So that's another big thing, and that how they picked who was going to be the Slightman every time the wolves came. I think we even mentioned this last time, but they take a weak parent, which they pick Slightman out. And, Roland kind of mentions that, hey, are you not like, they probably kill one of the kids to make this happen. You're like, your daughter didn't die naturally or however, like, it was probably Andy killed her and left Benny Jr. as a singleton, and therefore puts you in this position where you're more favorable to accept. And I'm sure if there would have been like at the time, he would have said, no, I'm never going to do that he would have been dead immediately too. So, I mean, like, again, you putting yourselves in his shoes, you understand it. But again, like, you are sacrificing all these kids for your kid. And it's hard to say what me personally would do in that
Well, it harkens back.
situation.
I remember us talking about it in a previous episode. It harkens back to what Eddie said about Susanna's pregnancy and about how he would abandon all of the twins of this town if it meant that Susanna was pregnant with his kid.
Right.
And so essentially that's the same scenario.
Right. It is the same scenario. He tells Slightman that, hey, all this stuff we've been telling you and the town that these plans, we're not going to this cave. We're not doing this. That's all a red herring. This is what's really going to happen. And then Roland kind of lays out the plan to the Ryza dish throwers, and basically then you find out they're robots. They're essentially Andy.
Yeah.
And they have, except for differences in a little way, but they have one of the satellite dishes on their heads underneath their hoods, like the bear, like Shardik did, like those other robots that they came into contact with. And they're like, you want to hit that. And, I think one of the ladies is like, well, what about the thing in the chest? He's like, oh, that was just a lie. Don't worry about that. You want to hit the head. And so, now that, they have this plan that they're going to hide in these ditches. They're going to make it look like they're going to send some kids up to throw trash or whatever to make it look like they went up this way. And they hope that the wolves get up this road, and then they can have them kind of like split up in a way. And then they'll come out and guns drawn. And
they're going to hide all the twins in the rice beds from.
Yes.
So everything ties into that Ryza story.
Right.
It
does.
It's so wild how that all played together. That was a good epiphany moment for me whenever they said they were hiding the twins in the rice beds. Because up to this point, we didn't know where. We knew he was lying, but we didn't know where it was going to be. And I thought that was a good tie-in to that story. That's
right. And also, you also know why earlier in the book when they found out that all the horses were gray, like that's why, because the horses are also some sort of mechanical machinery conveyance, like a scooter, who knows what they are, but they look like horses. And I'm sure like most people didn't get close enough to them to notice anything because they're scared out of their wits kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like 25 or 35 years ago. So they're
right.
The story's been repeated, like they're not they would have been the children of the previous generation of people that had their twins stolen.
Right. And so that's when the wolves are coming. So they see like the cloud of dust and all this stuff, and they know the wolves are on the way and they're going to be here shortly. And so most of the twins come back and they get sent off, but Jake and Benny and the two Tavery twins, who are the really good looking ones that made the map, they're still up the road because they went further. And, they're on their way back when the boy Tavery twin, like, gets his foot caught in a hole or something like that and, like, breaks his ankle, essentially. And so now they're trapped. I kind of thinking like a crossroads kind of thing, like a turn. So they're up this way, and the wolves are, like, coming from another direction, but they're going to turn up that road. And so now the conundrum is Eddie wants to go find out why they haven't shown back up. And Roland's like, no, we can't do that. Like, Eddie... when Jake and Eddie's relationship sometimes I think is big brother, little brother, and sometimes like a father son. But like Eddie's got this, I think he wants to be the big brother to Jake that his brother wasn't to him.
Yep, I was about to say that. And I think there's a part of that in Roland too, because sure, Roland didn't have a bad relationship with his dad as far as I know from everything we've heard, but it does seem like he was a hard man. Like he does, like Jake or Roland didn't get to be a kid the way he's kind of given that leash to Jake. Like Roland had to be a gunslinger. He had to go through the whole thing with court and all that.
And there's
a bit of that in both of them.
And that makes Eddie in this situation acting as a big brother and wants to go help.
Yeah.
And Roland's thing is no, not because that I don't think he's worried about. I mean, he's worried, but like he's more of Jake is a gunslinger.
Yeah, it's more the
This is what he is
Yeah.
trained in to do, and he's looking at Jake as a gunslinger. Eddie's looking at Jake
Yeah.
as a 12, 13-year-old kid who's
Yeah.
stuck up somewhere that he doesn't know what's happening.
It's that trust thing we talked about last episode, where for each character, Roland has had a moment where he's has had to trust the
Right.
gunslinger and these people. But in this moment, so it's the question is, what's the right thing to do here? Is it to don't waste any time trying to save the Taverty twins, but instead make sure that you fulfill the plan that saves all of the twins?
All of them.
Or
Right.
is it to take the moment to be the hero for the Taverty twins, but you are putting the rest of the process at risk? And Jake chooses the opposite of what Roland chose back in the Gunslinger, and he chooses to help the Taverty twins.
And that kind of thing, like, so you in that scene, you're getting the kind of the one side, you get Roland and Eddie, and then the other side is Jake, and they're all kind of in the same mindset of what needs to be done. And, you know, Jake does go there. It's like, you know, I can leave him here, and the girl's probably not going to come either. She's going to stay with, so the very smart thing to do would be to grab Benny and hightail it back down to the bottom, or to where Roland and them are, and to continue the plan. Or, you know, you stay, you help them, or you just stay with them, and it even looks more like what they're trying to make it look like is actually happening, because there's now all these kids up the road. So that would fool the wolves even more. So, you know, but he winds up, they get his foot out of this hole, and they wind up carrying him, and he's kind of passed out, and they get to the crossroads kind of thing, and Roland can see the wolves coming, and he knows that they're going to, I guess, go down kind of a dip in the road, and they're going to have, you know, he's just guessing, like, we may, as long as they're all still together and there's not a group that are further up from this other group, he's going to have a few seconds to cross the road and everyone get hidden and things. So, like, once they do that, he's like, come on. They wound up all jumping in the pit, the trench thing, and it's crowded, and, you know, the Taverty twins are kind of not lack awareness a little bit, I guess, because they're there, but, like, I don't think they really understand what's everything. But now Benny sort of does a little bit more, even though he's still a little bit, you know, immature about this whole situation.
In comparison to Jake, like, all the kids in this town are like, I thought there was going to be some epiphany about Benny, because Jake describes him as being like, sure, he's my age, but you would think he's like a 5-year-old the way he talks, you know?
Right.
Like, all the kids in this town are kind of, what do you think that is about? I get that Jake is way more mature because of his experience with Roland and with the quartet. But, like, I think there's a point here that even the twins are kind of like, maybe they're just more, if you are a parent and you don't know which twin is going to be the one you're going to, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it just has something to do with the way they're treated differently because of this situation. I don't really know.
I think they're, you know, it happens every, you know, 20, 25 years or whatever that, you know, this happens. And I, you know, as a parent, you know, in the back of your mind, you know, at some point, like, what was it? Was it Eisenhart? I think had kids like right before the wolves came last time, and so they were actually able to grow up and never have that threat of the wolves, because they knew just based on years that they would be aged out by the time. But if you have kids that fall into that thing where they're going to hit that, because they know in the back of their minds, even if they're not thinking of it every day, they know that at some point these wolves are coming. And I think they spoil, coddle, like overdo things. And I think with Benny too, since he's become this Singleton. One is that he's even coddled more, and two, they make mention of it that since he is the foreman's son, he's not able, or they don't allow him to interact as much with the other kids because, like, and which is weird too, because they were like, "Oh, he's the foreman's son, so these other kids are beneath him or something." That which it makes sense. But, with kids, if it was a kid thing where they didn't want to play with him because they thought he was like
snooty,
too good for him or snooty or something.
Yeah.
But it sounded more like it was kind of like
the community's kind of tier system.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think in that way, like from a young age, Benny has been on his own and being coddled, and like it stunted his maturity growth to a point where, yeah, he is older than Jake, but just in life experience, he's had none. I mean, like literally none. But yeah, so like they're hiding. The wolves come. They, some of them go up the hill thing, and then they burst out. Roland's like, for your lives, whatever his little speech is, and they all get up and they start throwing dishes and shooting, and like Roland's idea is, so you got this little split. He's going to shoot all the wolves that are right in the front of the road that's going toward the cave, and that way he can pile up bodies and make it harder for the wolves behind them to get down. And then that leaves just a smaller group for the Riza ladies and Jake and Eddie or whoever else. And so, that's what they're doing. But in the middle of everything, like, so they've got their sticks and their sneeches and lightsabers and all that stuff. Well, Margaret Eisenhart stands up or whatever, she's doing her thing and not paying attention to, because there's probably a lot of wolves and crap going on, but she gets her head lopped off.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course it falls right at Benny, and Benny freaks out, like, because again, like, probably some of the maturity, and he's a kid. I mean, like having somebody's head fall in your lap when you're a kid, regardless of how mature you are, probably gonna freak out a little bit.
Up to this point, it really felt like they were like, it was like going way too easy. As a matter of fact, I was reading this part in the living room, and I at some point I had an opportunity to say to Becca, I was like, all right, like these are going too good. They're just mowing these wolves down. Something bad's about to happen. Like, there's no way it's this easy. And then there was these few deaths.
Right. And so, so when Benny jumps up and he's like, oh my God. And then like a dude, one of the wolves that's fairly close to him throws two sneeches.
Yeah.
And Jake sees it and he's fast enough to get one, but it was too close. And the second one hits Benny and he basically explodes. But other than that, they continue on and they're actually able to kill all the wolves. And so the one thing about those two deaths too are, one, at the very beginning when the Roland starts talking and devising this plan with the Riza throwers, Eisenhart is like, my wife is going to do this, but if she dies, I'm going to curse you. And,
that's right. Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to make it my life to do away with you or whatever. And so that's one person that gets killed. And then Benny, when Roland and Slightman are having their issue, when they're having their talk right before all this, like, Slightman's kind of like, you're going to try and get revenge. He kind of makes that like, he kind of implies that he's like, you're gonna do something, and Roland's like, no, I'm not.
It's because whenever Roland tells Beanie to go with Jake, he thinks it's because they're going to try to kill his son as retaliation for
It's a setup.
He implies that,
right.
You know what? And you know what's funny is like these are the two characters that you would root for. Well, I don't know that you root necessarily for Benny, but Benny is like innocent in this situation. If anything,
Right.
you want to see his dad die, not him.
Right, exactly.
And
Which
then
is
that,
great.
and then this is the first lady that presents the plate to.
Yeah.
So she's like probably the most likable of the
Yes.
Rice. If they made a movie about this book, they would have some like kick-ass actress playing her, and she would
Definitely.
like everybody would like that character, and this would be the tragedy at the end of the movie.
Right.
Yeah, it's
And,
like
you know,
it's like the two like least wanted characters to die end up dying in the battle, and everything else goes smoothly.
and the thing I like about that too is that King didn't cop out and kill Slightman Senior.
Yeah,
because again, that's what you wanted. You wanted him to die. Like
expected even.
You didn't even expect it. But and even on top of that, like so once all the fighting stops and the guns stop, the people down the Rice realize that it's over and that they've actually won.
Yeah.
And then somebody had gone, I forgot who he sends down there. But they tell Eisenhart and Slightman that, what happened. And they hear this screaming and, all this stuff, and they come running up. And what Eisenhart said before winds up, his reaction, obviously, that his wife has died is major and he's grieving, but he doesn't he doesn't turn to Roland and blame him.
Yeah.
He is involved in his own mourning.
Right.
Whereas Lightman comes up there and I mean, he's mourning, obviously, and he's like that. But then he starts saying stuff to Roland where people around can hear him. And again, another surprising thing from Roland is he tells him to shut up or you're going to get found out. So even after this, he's still willing to protect Slightman. And at first I always thought, why would he do that? Why? At this point, his son's dead, which was the only reason he said he was kind of protecting him to begin with. Now there's no reason to. And so I was like, why would he do that? But I think it's more of a messed up thing is that Roland wants him to live out his life in this Calla with all these kids that he sees were saved, and no one know what Slightman was except for himself, and he's basically in a prison of his own mind, and he's going to be tortured essentially throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah.
In this town, which either way he's either gonna do that, or he's gonna wind up committing suicide, or he's just gonna lose it and become some crazy hermit weird guy that has no mind left. And I think that is a bigger punishment than killing him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So everyone's happy and they're singing songs, and I like the fact that the people that were against doing all this at first are all we did it and all this stuff. But this is when you find out more about the wolves. So we talked a little bit about. Yeah,
we talked about.
Were we recording then? I can't remember. But so the wolves are basically Doctor Doom, but with a snout. And they carry lightsabers from Star Wars, and they carry Sneetches, albeit a modified version of the Sneetch from the Harry Potter series. And even the plaques say, Harry Potter, Sneetch, whatever. And so now you're just what? That's crazy. So you get time frames. I think we talked about this last time. You get Doctor Doom from the 60s, early 60s. You got Star Wars from the late 70s. And then you got Harry Potter in the late 90s, or I think is right around when
I think it's important that I think it's 1999. Let's see what the release of.
That could be.
I'm gonna look at
either way.
I'm gonna look at the book and movie.
Either way, it implies that they're drawing technology. Well, I mean, technology for lightsabers wasn't a reality, but they're drawing things from our worlds and making them so, but they're from different time periods. So whoever's doing this is able to access different eras and different times.
So
to be able to do this.
the book was published in 97, but the movie was published in 2001.
So kind of right in the middle there.
Yeah.
If you average them, it's 1999.
Yeah. But if you had a Sneetch object, I think the movie would have had to been published, right? For them to have
What's weird is, though, I'm trying to remember. So I know you haven't read the books, or you didn't watch the movies either.
No.
Because I don't think Quidditch, I can't remember if Quidditch was even mentioned in the first book, to be honest. Because Harry joins the Quidditch team like in the second or third year. And that's when you learn like, the Sneetches and the different size balls and all that. So like, and I don't know if you know what the Sneetch is in Harry Potter, but like in the game, it's a tiny, maybe the size of a golf ball, maybe a little bit bigger.
With little wings.
With little wings. And then like, there's a person on each team that's called the Seeker, and their only job is to see if they can catch that. And if you catch it, you win. But it's just got wings. This Sneetch has all kinds of blades and will tear you up and like just craziness. Then that brings, so that's kind of like that first thing where you understand that there's, you've gotten songs and things like that from worlds that bled over in the midworld, but this is like some crazy things where you've seen like they've altered, like I said, lightsaber's not a real thing.
Yeah.
But somebody went to 1977 and was like, man, I bet we could do that. Yeah. And make it like a real weapon. And they came back over here and they actually made them. And which also the wolves have been doing this for hundreds of years or however many. So that means like, again, that throws in the time jumping and time travel thing, because they would have had to go to 1977 hundreds of years ago to develop the weapons.
In their world.
Same thing with Harry Potter in their world.
Yeah.
And so like that kind of ends like, well, you think it ends that part. Everyone's celebrating, but what no one seems to realize is that Susanna has disappeared.
Yeah. Before we move on to the conclusion, I want to tell you what I thought was happening. So remember I said that I was reading the book and then I said, oh, this is going way too smoothly. Something bad is going to happen. What I thought was going to happen was that they were going to defeat the wolves. And then in the scene where they hear the people cheering in the rice field or whatever, I thought it was going to turn out that they weren't cheering, that the wolves had actually, like, there was like two groups and had like lit the rice fields on fire, and like they were going to lose all the twins is what I thought. It was going to be like a really dark ending.
That's pretty morbid ending there.
And so I'm glad it didn't turn out that way, but that was my first, there's an old Scary Tales for that kid's book that always had the really scary covers. It had short stories. I remember one of the short stories had to do with throughout the story, they keep thinking that the laughing and cheering going on at this fair is all the people having fun. And then it turns out at the end of the book that it was like these, I think it was like zombie pirate things had like come out of the sea or whatever. And then they escape this and get to the fair. And then it turns out they were already there, that the people were screaming, not cheering. And so I thought it was a moment like that. I was like, oh crap. They lit they burned the rice people on fire. But yeah, so that didn't happen. That would be... And then another thought I had was, okay, they got this group of wolves. They don't know how many there are. I know Roland has a pretty good idea that there's not many, because he has seen through his travels, and it's been spelled out throughout the book. There's been lots of seeds that there's a lifespan on these like nuclear powered robots. They only survive so many hundreds of years, and so much time has passed now that he just knows there can only be a handful. But but I was thinking though, like, how do they really know how many there are? So like they could go back and celebrate. Roland and the quartet could leave town, and then the next day
16 more show up.
Yeah, 16 more show up. Yeah, who knows? But none of that happened, and or has happened yet. And there,
one thing on that too is the question, and we talked about it. Well, we can talk about this toward the end. I was gonna talk about how the other Callas and stuff like that with Andy and the wolves and stuff like that. We'll wait till we get because I've already got that noted down after the conclusion. But that's an interesting thing, is like what these other calls have gone through. But anyway, so like Susanna's disappeared, and then I forgot who it was. I think it was Rosalita, maybe, that mentioned like, hey, she's gone, and where is she? And they start looking around, and like
it's definitely I can't remember why. Yeah, I can't remember why though, but yeah, you're right. It was Rosalita.
Well, I think I can't remember if she saw her going somewhere or that something was gone. Maybe I think did she have her wheelchair with her? I don't remember. But anyways, but they realize that she's gone. And so Roland gathers Eddie and Jake and is like, and Father Callahan, because, now basically Roland's like, hey, you are part of this quartet. Mm-hmm. Like, you are an official member. And Susanna's gone. So there's only one place that she could go. Mm-hmm. And that's to the doorway cave. And so they realize that they got to get up there as fast as they can. And so they take off, they start climbing the mountain. I really want to see this mountain because one, she was somebody left her an electric scooter to ride up. So that's one heck of a path to take an electric scooter most of the way up a mountain.
Yeah.
And then they find that scooter, and then there's the big rock thing that's kind of hanging out that you have to kind of go around. And they do, and they get around there, and they realize that it's too late, that she's gone. And not only that, but she took Black 13 with her, which means they can't open the door back up.
Yep.
And
she can close the door behind her, so they can't even. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're stuck. And then Eddie's freaking out and blah blah. And meanwhile, Roland goes and gets this book that he had mentioned earlier that was backwards and everything. And he pulls this book out. And it is. Well, it turns out that it's the book Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And they basically, Roland's like, what is it? They're kind of discussing what this is. What's the meaning of this? And Callahan's like, this is like, how is this possible? This is my life. And then he starts to question like reality. Like I know I'm real. But he feels false to himself, but he also feels not real, but real. And he says he felt 19. And then he's like, but this is a novel, and damn it, I'm a real person. And so that just brings into all kinds of craziness. Like, is this like Callahan's been through all kinds of worlds? So could a variation of Stephen King have been in a world where this really happened, and somebody just named Stephen King happened to write a book about a true thing? Or is Callahan actually somebody from a novel? Or it's just mind-blowing what the possibilities of this thing means.
So Callahan points out that he had a childhood fear of Clippy, or a vampire in his closet. I can't remember what he called it. Mm-hmm. And there's he never told anyone, so there's no way it could be in this book written by Stephen King. And I hear what you're saying. So my first reaction is that it's like Alan Wake, or something where it's like a writer, which Alan Wake is based on Stephen King. You know what Alan Wake is?
I don't know if I know what that is.
It's a game. I'm working at Best Buy. I'm sure you've seen it. It was really popular, especially I think around the time that I started at Best Buy. But it's like a game where this writer who is like they've admittedly based on Stephen King and a few other authors kind of amalgamized into one character, but he is writing a novel, and the things in his novel seem to start happening in the story. And in the first game, he's gone to some lake house or something, and he's finding pages of a novel that he doesn't remember writing, but on the pages things are happening. and it all plays into the way the game plays out. And recently there's a sequel that I haven't played yet, but it's got mixed reviews, but I think the story is getting good reviews. I think it's just kind of some of the gameplay is getting mixed reviews. But that sort of thing where there's this writer that my thought was there's a writer writing these characters. These characters are now discovering that they are part of this writer's
story,
mental universe. Yeah. And there's also a reference to it in Red Dwarf. Have you ever watched the show Red Dwarf?
I know Red Dwarf. I haven't watched it, but I know the premise of it.
So there's a Red Dwarf kept having these like comeback seasons. They'd disappear for like 10 years and then they'd get like a Kickstarter and come back for a season.
Right.
One of their comeback seasons, they go and try to find the writer of the show because they're trying to stop all these, all these cancellations and comebacks so they actually go into like the regular world and they're like trying to find their creator. So it's like this journey to find God kind of thing because they're trying to find their creator. So I'm thinking about it like this is one of those types of things. But you brought up something that I didn't consider until you just said it. There's the whole like if you had an infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of keyboards with an infinite amount of time, eventually, they could mistakenly, write every work of Shakespeare. And the key and that's true. Well, there's no way it's not a truth because there's no way to prove it. But like the reason why it is mathematically true is because of infinite, because it is endless possibilities, and amongst all the random combinations that you could possibly have in the world, one of those results is a Shakespeare play. So in the same way, if there is infinite universes with infinite Stephen Kings writing infinite books, one of them will be each of their lives. Every person in the Calla, it would be one of their lives. So like in that way, it makes sense that there would be a book that would be Callahan's life.
Have you ever did you ever watch Teen Titans Go?
Oh, Elliot watches it, but I haven't seen every bit of it. Yeah.
So Teen Titans Go is hilarious.
Yeah.
First of all. But there's an episode of Teen Titans Go where it starts out normal and they're just like, what? This is just stupid. And they decide that they're going to go to the real world and and find the writers. And they're like, because they're like, y'all are slacking in your job. And they basically go and they're like, we can write a better episode than this. And so there's an episode that they write about themselves, and it's nothing but fart jokes the entire time, and it's hilarious.
I listen to those going on as Elliot watches them, and they're all wild. Every one of them is.
Oh yeah, like it's such a crazy show. But so the other thing with that, this is how the book ends. Like Eddie realizes he's got to get to Susanna. Callahan realizes he's a character in a book. And then it just ends.
I like this moment though, at the very end where everybody is like in panic. And all right. So the best thing about the ending is Eddie's trying to save Susanna. And this moment he doesn't care about the Dark Tower. He's choosing Susanna over the Dark Tower. We talked about that last episode. Roland's last. Callahan wants to know why he's in this book. Why is he a character within a character? And he feels like he's a real person. And then what is Jake's motivation? Jake is probably wanting to, I don't know. He's always trying to like sort of keep the family together and like keep he's pulling all the strings back together. Susanna is in this other New York where they're supposed to be saving the tower, or we're assuming so. I don't necessarily know that's where she went. I'm assuming, where she's going to possibly give birth to a demon that's going to eat her after she births it.
Right.
And Roland is like smiling in the corner, like, okay, I've got an idea, Right. And I thought that was the best part of the ending is he's like, I know how to open the door. We're going to save Susanna. We're going to save the tower,
right.
That's the best part of the
ending. Need to worry, folks.
Yeah.
All under control. But yeah, so more going back to the whole novel thing.
Yeah.
So, one thing, and I've tried to throw little things here and there as we've been going along in these books.
Oh yeah.
and in no way even close to coming to spoil, but I've been throwing these little tidbits like, oh man, they keep talking about authors and like different things about books keep showing up. Like the Wizard of Oz shows up, and then like, it's all this stuff. And now you've got Stephen King who's shown up, and not only Stephen King, but like an actual character from a book of his. Whereas like you've heard, you've seen like the Wizard's Castle, and you've seen, these weird things have shown up. So now you actually have your first real tangible thing from a book. Mm-hmm. And then also you've got kind of from the beginning of this with books, you've got the Wayne D. Overholser book, and then you've got Benjamin Slightman Jr. book,
and then they're all connected to the line of
and then they're all connected. Arthur. And so like you have an author in Towers World who is, say, Wayne D. Overholser, who is actually a person in this world. Yeah. And a totally different person. So now you got to understand there's a Wayne D. Overholser here, and there's also a Wayne D. Overholser here. Are they the same? Like, is it like, you know how they say there's infinity worlds, that there's one of you in each one of those worlds? Yeah. So is that kind of that thing that, these two, probably in the New York world, the Overholser and Slightman don't know each other, have absolutely nothing to do with each other. They just happen to both be authors who both happen to write books that kind of tie in to the Calla and then Callahan thing. And then there's still the mystery of why did the name of Charlie the Choo-Choo, why did the author's name change? So that is still up in the air. But my question to you is, what is the significance of Callahan in Salem's Lot? What do you think it is? Like, if you had to guess what's going to happen as far as...
So I'll tell you, this is like someone watching Lost today versus watching Lost when it came out. I have been somewhat, I won't say spoiled, because I don't know what's going to happen in these stories, and everything has been a surprise. I had no idea Eddie Dean was going to be on an airplane or any of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, I was not spoiled by anything specific, but the things going into the Dark Tower before ever reading the first page of The Gunslinger, my idea of what the Dark Tower was if you compared the Dark Tower series to Sanderson's Cosmere, I think Sanderson's Cosmere, he's made up this entire universe that is in no way connected to Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is not like a citizen on some weird planet in the middle of the Cosmere. It is. Right. It just, all these characters exist in the same world in a Marvel cinematic universe kind of way. Like they all exist in the same world, but their only connection is that they exist in this world, and in our world, that story is all made up by Brandon Sanderson. Whereas the Dark Tower, I feel like the Dark Tower is Stephen King's like cognitive, like the Dark Tower is Stephen King's like a mind universe, like almost like in Dreamcatcher, like where he's got like his little mind library thing, right? Like the Dark Tower is like, it's just this like universe that is Stephen King characters all meshed into like this strange entanglement of a universe. That's what I saw the Dark Tower as before I ever read the first page, which is also why it was intimidating to me to read it, because I thought I had to read everything written by Stephen King in order to understand it. I had no idea that it was this much of like a story, that like there's just these characters, right, and you follow this all the way through. So I was not surprised that I would see a character like Callahan that came from one of King's stories into this one. And I even was not surprised that within this story, that story would also exist. And if that's the case, then you have to tell this story where a character discovers that they're a character within a book,
So now, do you think Callahan and them are real, or do you think that this whole thing is just taking place as a fever dream inside Stephen King's head?
Yeah, like he's like this, like he's in a coma, like Worf, and
Exactly. Like,
yeah. So that's hard for me to answer. It's hard for me to answer because is Callahan just a character in a book? Well, yes, of course. But this is hard. This is hard to describe. We're also characters in this book because I feel like this book like breaks the fourth wall so much that it is both like Stephen King's world, which we
right.
really live in, and it is all these other like fictional worlds that Stephen King has written. And so like the character Callahan in Roland's world now is the same character from the book Salem's Lot, and he exists because the character / real person in our universe wrote the book.
Right.
And I think I have a theory about where the story might go. And again, it's partially because I've kind of heard things about, I haven't heard anything specific, but putting together the little tidbits that I've heard about the series and just kind of making my own assumption. I think that maybe in these books, Stephen King dies in whatever world they go looking for him in. So I think that if I were writing the next book, I would say they go and they decide they're going to try to find Stephen King to get answers for this. And whenever they do, they find out he died. And the last book he wrote was Wolves of the Calla. Or I don't know, but they find out he died. And so then they're trying to find the universe where he didn't die and get him to write the rest of the series is what I think could be. I don't know.
I like that. So there, and I won't say like it's all kind of spelled out.
Well, I'll tell you why I made that assumption, because I don't know if I'm probably not right, but I'll tell you why I made that assumption is because I heard that him getting hit by the van had to do, like, from this moment on, has a lot to do with him finishing the series. And that could just mean, oh, he got off his lazy butt and finally read it because he was afraid he was going to die before he got to. Or it could be a bigger plot point, or both, you know? And so that's why I came up with that theory of that plot line. So, I mean, I don't know that it's fair to compare my, I couldn't have experienced it, back in 2002 or whenever this book came out. You know what I mean? Like, I've already had years of hearing little tidbits of people talk about the book that's changed my first experience with it,
Like I said, there's like more so in this book. There's a lot of like hints that he's dropped in this book. And it's kind of like, I mean, you've seen The Sixth Sense, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
The first time you watch it, you get to the end and, you realize, spoiler, that he's dead the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh my God. And then you watch it again and you're like, wow, he never hid the fact that he was dead throughout the whole movie. It says you
or Mr. Robot.
Yeah. Right. Or Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
So once we finish this, if you went back and read this book, you'd be like, oh crap. Yeah. He was like, there's breadcrumbs all over the place.
So the reason why, the only thing I could say that doesn't match with what I just described as my understanding of what the Dark Tower universe is that it is more than just Stephen King. Like, if it were all just like Stephen King's, but it could be just him and his influences, I guess. But like if it were all just Stephen King's stories or somehow sharing this like amalgamated universe, then you wouldn't also have The Wizard of Oz. And, so then I'm thinking, well, is it something as like, this is really all taking place between, all these books and the Theater of the Mind, bookstore, and it's the characters are jumping from book to book, or something like that. But then I'm like, I feel like King has more of a, I don't feel like that would be the direction he would go. This is definitely like a infinite universes, infinite possibilities kind of like collective thing.
Right.
But but I didn't really consider it the way that if there is an infinite number of Stephen Kings and an infinite number of universes, then eventually he would write all of our lives, Right.
I
mean, it's just there'd be some boring books for King though, there'd be no no supernatural.
And so like the other thing too is that, so Callahan obviously has been in the Calla for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also in New York, and in his New York and in his world there, vampires existed.
Yeah.
So like, and then obviously in the Calla, they think vampires are in Thunderclap and all that stuff. So like you got to figure in the world where King wrote Salem's Lot, that vampires weren't necessarily a real thing.
No, yeah.
Again, it's a made up thing.
Right. Yeah.
So then that just the nuances of this whole thing, I'm telling you, it pays off really well. But
so the vampires existing in Callahan's world, I believe, is because it's hard to talk about, because is it just coincidence that Callahan was in a world with vampires, or was Callahan in a world with vampires because he exists within a story written by Stephen King, where Stephen King,
vampires.
Yeah, I think it's that one. I didn't even consider the other one until you talked about it. I like the theory, but if I'm being honest, I always believe that it was that one. Callahan exists because Stephen King wrote a book where Callahan existed in a world with vampires, and Stephen King wrote that book in a world that didn't have vampires. Now there is the Manny, and there's the not the vampires, but the seer guy, or the guy that
the Sayer.
Yeah, Sayer, and
with the thing on his forehead and stuff.
The low men. I think of them as they exist in Callahan's world because they've learned to travel through worlds the way Roland and Eddie and Susanna have, and they have, other motivations. I don't think that Stephen King wrote them into Callahan's world. They're like world hoppers, I
like that. Can't wait for you to find out. Another thing, jumping to a different subject, is which I was saying we talk about with the idea of other Callas being raided by the wolves, and kind of the same thing that happens in this Calla happens. They don't know how widespread it is. They just know it happens to a few. So one is, if Calla Bryn Sturgis gets raided, we'll kind of get even at every 25 years. Mm-hmm. So is it there every 25 years, and then let's say there's 3 other Callas that are raided by the wolves? Is it split up? Like, so in between that 25 years, is there like, the Calla gets raided, and then 5 years later, this other Calla gets raided, and 5 years later, this other Calla, and it just continues? Or do they all do it?
25 Callas, they just once a year, it's a rotation.
Once a year, it's yeah. So like, and then the other question then is that we know that Andy facilitates this. So there's no mention of Andy like disappearing, really.
Yeah.
So if you take that in consideration, is there an Andy or a version of Andy in every one of those Callas too?
Yeah.
In which case, because they make it seem like Andy is very unique, especially, it's that that they have contact with these other Callas, because, this one Calla makes the plates and stuff for the Sisters of Ariza. And then they get together with other Ariza clubs, or whatever you want to call them, and they have different competitions sometimes, and they trade and they do things. So if they went to one of these other Callas, you would think they would know that there was another Andy robot in each one of these Callas, but they don't ever mention that. So it's kind of like, I don't know if that's just kind of if that's just a writer thing where he threw that out there, that the other Callas get rated, and then didn't think of the logistics of what that would look like when he was writing it. But that also seems like a big thing for him to miss. Yeah, like,
I didn't think about that. That's a good point. The other people would know that there's other Andys and other Callas.
Right. And wouldn't that seem weird too? Like, but they didn't put 2 and 2 together with their Andy, so maybe they don't put 2 and 2 together with other people's Andys. But like, you would think that would have been mentioned at some point too, when they were talking with Roland, Eddie, and Suzanne. They were like, discussing Andy. They were like, oh yeah, Calla, whatever, they've got an Andy, and Calla, whatever, they've got this Andy. And then the other question is, they've defeated the wolves. And if there are Andys in these other towns, do they get some signal like the jig is up, and then those robots go on a rampage and just kill the entire town and everybody in them?
Yeah. So if the wolves were collecting children from all these other Callas, then like essentially this one Calla just like saved everyone.
Right.
And are they going to keep having twins now?
That's the other thing. Like, why were they having twins? Was it something, let's say, like, we know that whoever did the wolves, they're very technologically advanced. Have they maybe created some kind of
how did
serum
they do it?
or something that they expose these people to that ensure that they had twins? And then on the twin thing too, which we had talked about, was all the twins are boy girl. There's no mention of identical twins, but when most people think twins, you almost always think identical twins. Like most people kind of like take that, but like there's no mention of any identical twins. It's all boy girl. And I think I can't remember if we mentioned this on the show or if we had just talked about it, but like, do they do that to ensure the population continues?
Yeah, definitely. We did talk about this in the last episode. I think this is one of the most creepy and intriguing parts of the book is whenever you discover that like this is like a garden for now we know it's breakers, but I was at the time thinking vampires in the mountains. Like this is like a garden where they make sure they cultivate the right sexes so that they can continue to plant more seeds, just like the risa in the rice bed. And then they always plant two because they're going to take one, like it's and also like at the beginning of the book, you find out that they have twins and they think that's normal. Every little town has nothing but twins.
Right.
Yeah. To me, that was the creepiest part of the book. Matter of fact, at work the other day, I was telling somebody about this book and that was the part that was the premise that I told them was that whole part of it.
The one thing too about the Callas and the wolves and raiding other Callas is, early on when Roland and them first get to Eisenhardt's, or I think did they stay with the Eisenhardts at first? It was either Eisenhardt or Overholzer. I can't remember which one in particular, but they're describing what the Calla like kind of looks like, and it's literally like the Callas are literally, my guess from the way they described it would be like starting at Maine, going all the way down the coast to Florida, and there's different Callas. Because I think I want to say one of them just says it's like 2,000 wheels or miles or something like that long. I mean, that's huge. Like that is enormous. And so
it's even like they're planted in rows.
Yes. And they only know that this is happening to them and the call is not too far around, because that would be like if the wolves are coming out of Thunderclap and Calla Bryn Sturgis is the first Calla outside of that. And then, you figure there's a line going down. So they're hitting those first few in the line. At some point, the other ones are too far away for those wolves, unless there's other Dogons with other wolves or something like that. Because you couldn't travel 2,000 miles and raid, because they say there's a train, right? But like, even so, that would be like, logistically, again, that would be almost impossible. So is it just centered around these few? And if that's the case, do the Callas further down, do they still have twins, or are they just normal? Because it wouldn't make any sense if the Callas way far down had twins, but no one ever raided them to take their twins.
So I found a map, but I'm trying to see how it relates to Thunderclap. Because I'm wondering if they're all in a row, but then Thunderclap is like to the east, so they have the same access to all of them. You know what I mean? But I got a map here, and I see Thunderclap, and all the Callas. Yeah, okay, so I'll share this with you. It's like all the Callas are like all in a row like this, and then Thunderclap is to the east of that. So they kind of, but it's not even. Bryn Sturgis is definitely the closest, and I don't know how accurate this map is. Let me see.
Right, yeah, because I mean, like I said, my deal would be, they're coming out of Thunderclap, and the Dogan is right there. Now they don't specifically say that the wolves are coming from the Dogan, But if the wolves are stationed further up here, they wouldn't be able to. I mean, even if they're east of it, that would still be a long way down here.
Basically, like the river that they talk about crossing the river to the Dogan. So the Callas basically follow that river north, and then Thunderclap is east of the river.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
But in any case, So does the future books deal with any other Callas, or are we done with? Callas?
Not really a spoiler. No, it's not a. The other Callas don't come into it as far as that goes.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, it's just it's again one of those things where we're probably thinking way too much about it.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to take it and whatever. Yeah. So I think we discussed it a little bit, but what'd you think as a whole, as far as the book, like as far as enjoyment and ranking, as far as I know you said, we kind of discussed last time between Drawing of the Three and this one. And like for me, and I think we said this again last time, that as a whole, I still think the Drawing of the Three from front to back was like just a thrill ride, like craziness and blah, blah. And this one was more of the slow burn, and they're leaving all this stuff and it's building and building. And then, the last section and the epilogue is just like, man, like, this book's kind of more of character and world building for the most part until that end. So yeah, I mean, I still like this book. Probably my favorite, at least so far. I'm not going to spoil the next books, but I think this one, just because of the Sneetches and the lightsabers and Doctor Doom and Salem's Lot and all that, I think that just kind of like takes it to another level. And so for me, as far as like, I'm a Lost fan and like I love stuff like that, and that whole thing just feeds into that.
There is definitely a lot more of that sort of mystery. Like for every question answered, for every answer there's two questions, kind of thing.
Right.
I agree with you there. I definitely, to me, those are my two favorite books out of what we got so far, and I like them both for different reasons. We in the last episode, after we got done recording, we were discussing this, but it wasn't on the recording. Okay. But so on the recording, I said, Drawing of the Three is my favorite, and this one would be my second favorite. And then after we hung up, or after we stopped recording, I said, I don't know. I really like them both for different reasons. It might be a tie. I think that I still, gun to my head, I think I would still say that Drawing of the Three is probably my favorite, but it's so close. I really like this one a lot. I really liked Wolves of the Calla a lot. And I still feel the same way. I recommended this book to somebody at work, the same person I was talking about earlier, and she had not read any of it so far. And I told her, I said, you can't read Wolves of the Calla without reading the whole series. Right. You could read Drawing of the Three, and there would be some parts that might be confusing to you, but it wouldn't be unrecognizable. You could read it, and it would be a book on its own. But I was telling her, I was like, you really should, maybe do the Gunslinger, and then start the series from the Drawing of the Three. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely like when we were reading the previous book, I wasn't recommending the series to people. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't like telling people, like I was asking people, hey, have you ever read The Dark Tower? But I wasn't going, oh man, you got to read this.
You need to read it.
Right. Whereas after reading the Wolves of the Calla, I'm like telling people, like, you got to put this on your list. You got to start reading the Dark Tower series now so we can talk about it.
That's what, like, for me, I always liked the Gunslinger. Like even from the first, I like the Gunslinger.
I appreciate it now. I think if I went back and read it too, I'd get more from it.
Right. And I think a lot of people do that. And I also think the same thing about Wizards and Glass is that
that's my least favorite.
Right. But I think even more so than the Gunslinger, I think you gain a bigger appreciation of that book.
Yeah.
As time goes, kind of thing.
Yeah. The thing I don't like about that one though is Wizard and Glass. It just feels like there's so much downtime in the flashback.
Yes. All right. It definitely could have been shortened.
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
beyond that. But the opening of the book is you almost. I think people give it an unfair assessment because they probably think of the opening of the book whenever they go back and remember it. They think, oh, that was the wasteland.
Right.
Whenever the whole like it's like 40% of the book is like the end of wasteland, and then you pick up
Right.
the last part. So it's probably people misjudge it a little bit. They might forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, one of the big, negative things that surprises me, even from like big Stephen King fans, and I think I said this before, is like, oh, I don't like fantasy. And the other thing is, oh, I don't like Westerns. Well, like,
yeah, I felt that way at first.
That book is very Western.
Yeah. I'm not into Westerns, and I thought I wouldn't like the series because I knew there was at least some of that. But it's not even,
Well, the two books that you get the most out of that are the Gunslinger and Wizard of Glass, and so
yeah.
But it kind of like, again, it's I mean, you could have eliminated a lot of stuff in Wizard and Glass and made it a little bit of a quicker read.
Let me throw something. I think it's kind of in the theme of this. Let me throw something out to you. I think when we were talking about, is Callahan a character in a Stephen King story, yada yada yada. I think that Roland is a character. Like, I think that Roland's position in this story could have been any Stephen King character. It just happened to be the character from The Gunslinger. You know what I mean? Like, because originally The Gunslinger was not written as a trilogy of The Dark Tower.
Right.
Although it does use all the same verbiage because it was ambiguous, I guess, at that time. Whenever he wrote The Gunslinger, it was just like, oh, the Dark Tower represented this endless goal that this cowboy is on. But it probably didn't mean much more than that. But like, I think that because Stephen King wrote that book, it is now a part of this amalgamation universe that's like Stephen King's like their various writings. And Roland is one of the many characters in that, and he happens to be our protagonist. But it could have just as easily been any other character from a Stephen King novel. And which doesn't make Roland less special. I don't guess I know exactly what I mean by that. I just think that kind of gives an example of why The Gunslinger would seem so jarringly different than the rest of the series, is because both in real life and as a part of this fictional universe that exists within Stephen King's cognition, it is just a book. It could have been any book.
Sure. Going with that theme, let's say like,
what if Callahan had been the main character? What if the Dark Tower took place and it was this like priest that had lost his way and he's been on a journey to find the Dark Tower, and it could still take place, but instead of him being from the line of Eld, he's from some like the, what are the people that look for the Holy Grail, the Christa Rosa Christas, or the
Knights Templar.
He could have been from some line of the Knights Templar, which I think all that even connects to Camelot and everything.
Probably.
And instead of him growing up with court, he, you could have told a similar story, but through the eyes of like this like priest that is like lost sight of God and is trying to find it again.
There's various Stephen King. I was trying to think of a good one. Like, in most Stephen King books, you've got like a main character that is fighting some like evil or coming up against something, and like a good protagonist. And so like, let's say this is all taking place in King's mind. And like, so in that mind, he has a choice to defend the tower. And so he, consciously, subconsciously, whatever, he chooses a champion, kind of like from the Radiance, like choose your champion. So like, maybe there's like an antagonist. It could be a real version of the Crimson King, and he's like, choose your champion. And in Roland's mind, he's got all these characters from his books. And he's like, okay, who's the most likely champion for me? And he goes, okay, Gunslinger, Roland. That's that's what he is. So I'm going to choose my champion from my books to be this guy.
Or it could be survival of the fittest. What character in Stephen King's novels would have what it takes to have succeeded this far in the pursuit of the tower? Whereas like other characters, like I don't know, the dad from Pet Cemetery or something, like he wouldn't have made it out.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
He would have never made it out of his little town to find the path of the beam or anything like that.
Right. And so like, and that's the thing, like I was trying to think of other books, and there are like, you got the kids from It, or like, you know, there's various characters like that, but none of them have really, like, you wouldn't, for me, like if I'm not going to choose like one of the kids from It to be like the Roland person. And I'm not going to choose, like, a lot of these characters in his stories they overcome things, they defeat these things, but it's more of like
they're the underdog.
Yeah, they're an underdog, and they just happen to dig down and do this. But like Roland is actually trained to do this.
He's kind of a badass either way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like he would be kind of like the natural thing, and maybe that's what the gunslingers were there for. The whole time was to be like the champion, and now it's finally got to the end, and Roland, again, survivor of the fittest, because he's the last gunslinger until Jake, Eddie, and Susanna. So yeah, it's just, there's so many possibilities coming up.
I don't know the rest of I don't know how relevant that conversation is because I don't know the rest of the story, but
right.
So you got
just spoiled the entire thing for you.
I hope not. There's actually one more spoiler that I have, because I remember whenever the movie was coming out and people were talking about what they expected it to be, and I remember hearing something so much that I actually don't want to say it because I don't want to know any more details about it. I just know that there's some element of, I hesitate to even say it because I don't even want to know whether you turn your camera off again. I know that there's some element of like a cyclical, like there's like a cycle, like a repeating cycle to this story. I know that much of it. But that's literally all I know. The only reason why I know that is because I remember that the spoilers online was that the movie would be like a different cyclical, different cycle than the book. But I don't know anything beyond that. I don't know,
and I mean, that could mean all kinds of things too.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, it could be like what we're talking about, where like
there's different,
you got so many, infinite worlds that that's kind of the movie. Because if you take the movie versus the books and just on,
I barely remember it. I'm not even just saying that because I know it's like a joke how bad the movie is. Like I literally barely remember the movie.
Well, there's definitely things that are different. So like if you say like, because the big thing that they tried to play with the movie was that it could be another version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that version, Roland is a black man.
Yeah.
There's no Eddie Susanna. Jake and his family life are completely different. Like the Man in Black,
there's just no way.
Completely different. Like
there's just no way. I actually like Idris Elba, and in some parts of reading the book, I still picture Idris Elba.
Right.
But that doesn't bother me. But there's no way you could do, now that I've read as much as I have, there's no way Eddie and Susanna can't be in. I mean, it's just like, no, they're more of a driving character for me than Roland is. You know what I mean? Like Eddie is everybody's favorite character. Like Eddie is by far the best character.
Yes.
I mean, it's like making like a Star Wars, without Han Solo. Like it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I wouldn't take a lot of what you heard about that. Take it with a grain of salt as far as that, because because the original plan was kind of what they're trying to do now with the Amazon adaptation. Is it was going to be,
I have faith in that.
There's the original plan was that movie was going to be part of a TV series with movies interspersed through it and all that, and then it went from that to maybe we'll do 2 or 3 movies. And then it went down to, we're just going to do 1 movie. And then the movie was only like, I think the movie wasn't even 2 hours long.
No.
And so you got 7 books, which some of them are enormous, condensed down to an hour and a half-ish movie. And I think, and Stephen King has to come out and say, "Oh man, that was a fantastic thing," because he has to. I mean, he can't shit all over that movie, right?
Yeah.
But I think once they realized that thing was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and they came up with this thing of, oh yeah, it's the Dark Tower, but like it's like a different version of the Dark Tower. So don't even worry about the books.
Well, that's like on the table. That's every spoiler. That's all the cards are on the table now. There's everything else is completely blind to me. I have no idea. That was the thing going into the book. I knew that it had something to do with like Stephen King's like mind universe. Actually, that was my assumption. No one ever told me that, but that was just my assumption based on the way people talk about it. And then the fact that there was like this cyclical motion to the story. And so I imagine that the end of this is going to tie back into the gunslinger again. But it should have, even if it wasn't like an actual, like, oh, time is repeating kind of thing, like every great, like epic story that way is going to find a way to tie back into the first book at the end, just so that you get that feeling of like, coming back home. So your last, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say one thing that, you don't have to necessarily do it now, but what I would recommend you do at some point in the future is go back and read The Gunslinger in its original version without the revisions and see how the differences are, because he did, once he realized this was going to be like a big thing, he went back and added stuff to The Gunslinger to make it tie in to the rest of the books more. And
I do have two copies, and one is like way old, but it also says Dark Tower on the front. So I think this is still
it could, but one should say revisioned or remastered or whatever the literary version of that is.
Yeah.
And then, so if the version you have has Susan Delgado in it, and whoever else he mentions in that book, if she's in it, then that's the revised version, because she's not mentioned whatsoever in the original versions, because again, it wasn't meant to go that far. It was kind of like just a standalone story. But it's really cool how he extrapolated what he did from that story.
So this copy does say acknowledgement. The Gunslinger, copyright 1978 by Mercury Press for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. The Way Station for the Magazine of Science Fiction. So it has all the different publications. I know that originally it came out that way.
Yes.
I don't know, but the version I read when we did it on the podcast, it obviously had everything. It was the new version.
It's essentially the same story. It's just you don't get all the foreshadowing.
I remember him. I remember him being reminded of Susan Delgado and thinking about Court a few times. Like I remember all that. And you had told me that, so I knew that those must have been added in later. This one has a few illustrations, but they're just like line drawings. So anyway, your last bullet point here, what's going to happen, which I know we talked a lot about that, but I don't know. Like immediately in the character story, what's going to happen is there's got to be some pursuit of Stephen King. There's just no way they don't do that. If I were writing the book, Stephen King, if I were writing a book and like I was writing, they're looking for Beau McCoy because he wrote this book and they're all in it. Beau McCoy would be dead whenever they found him. I would have already passed on, which it would just add to the layer of, just irony and like weirdness of the book, because, people would be like, but he's not dead.
Right.
And
so now you've got, essentially what you got is, you got this whole novel Callahan Stephen King thing, and then you've got Susanna and Demon Baby and
another thing. Another thing is I have a prediction, but I don't want to know. You got to get your poker face ready.
All right.
I think Susanna dies giving birth to the demon. I think that I think it just because we're at a point in the series where a main character has to die, and that seems like the most obvious choice right now. You can't kill Jake again. Jake's going to make it to the end. Can't die twice. Can't die three times. Eddie
3 times. Yeah.
Eddie would be, I just don't want to believe it would be Eddie. So I think there'll be a death in the next book, and the demon baby seems like the most obvious thing. Though I don't want it to be true. I like all the characters, but I
exactly.
just think if I were writing the story, could be Callahan. But I think there's more to tell with Callahan realizing that he's in a book. So I think there'll be something there. And then as far as the story with Tower and Delaney and the vacant lot and all that, I think that is one of the beams, and I think that they're going to totally screw that up, and the lot's going to get destroyed. It's going to destroy that particular universe of New York. Oh, that could be the character loss that we get. If that is Callahan's New York, or I don't know whose New York that could be, but that character could die as a result of that. In Roland's world, could not exist anymore because that Tower of the Beam was lost. So that could be it. May not be Susanna.
So yeah, you know that there's two key worlds. The one they're on now, Roland's world, and then the world that has the rose. So those are the keystone things. So yeah, so if that world gets destroyed, that leaves only one left. Could that be it? Maybe. I don't know.
Huh. And they're the keys. And why are they the key worlds? Are they the keys because the Dark Tower happens to be at a place where people can get it? Because I know that we talked about like there could be a world where the Dark Tower exists on some planet in the middle of nowhere, and life can never reach it. You know,
right? Well, I think yes. I think that the mid-world, or I don't know what to call Roland's world because different sections are called different things. But his Earth, is the actual physical manifestation of the tower. That's on in his. So, like, if you've got, the tower is this, and there's worlds like balls in a line, and they're all like really close to each other. One world actually has the tower, and then one world in that line has the rose. All the other worlds are regular worlds. They just they're attuned to the tower, but the tower is only on one world, and the rose is only in one world. And those are like your like that's they keep talking about how the world where the rose is, that they can't go back once that time has hit. So that's why they have to get back to that New York and save the lot before that particular date, because in any other world they can go to any time that they want to, but in that particular world, because that's an actual like keystone world, they can't go back. They can only go with time.
So which that changes. Okay, I thought that every world had a Dark Tower somewhere there, but you're saying there's only two amongst infinite worlds,
right? Because I forgot what book it's mentioned in, but Roland says that, and it's more of kind of like one of those, because you don't know a lot, so that you may not stick in everyone's mind.
It's like how you read The Way of Kings, and it's like none of it makes sense, and then 5 books later you're like, oh, I gotta go back and read that book.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So like he mentions that. And it may be in Wastelands when they first go to I think it's in Wastelands when they first go to the Rose. But anyway, like it's kind of mentioned that's like the one place where there's an actual physical tower.
Because I understand that, but so I thought, do you know why in Doctor Who the Doctor's called the Doctor? It's mentioned in like one of the Matt Smith seasons, or it might have been, I don't know, it's in like one of the newer seasons, but the Doctor that's not actually his name. The universal translators everywhere, they translate it to the Doctor because he always shows up and helps people. And in most languages, that translates to the Doctor, but it doesn't actually mean like he's not a doctor. You know what I mean?
Doctor.
He's just he just helps. And I thought that the reason why we call like the Rose is also the Tower, it's because in Roland's world, it's the Tower. And so we learned that word, the Tower, that's what it represents. But really, if it had been a rose on Roland's world, then the book series would be called The Dark Rose, and we would be like, well, on Earth, it's a big tower in New York City. You know what I mean? Like we learned it as Roland learned it, But so on Roland's world, it is a tower, but there could be other worlds where it's something else.
Right, and so that's why so you got the tower, and then you got the 7 beams, however many there were, 8 beams, 12 beams, 12? There's only 2 left, whatever. But
Yeah.
those are actually like, so those beams, you got the tower, and then those are basically guide wires that are attached to the ground that are holding it steady.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the tower stands, the universe and all those different versions of Earth are stand. But if they break all those beams and all the guide wires are down, then they can collapse the tower. And if you collapse the tower, then all those worlds are thrown into destruction. So that's why, like, if you had a tower on each version of Earth, you could essentially destroy any one of those towers on any one of those Earths and do the same thing. So there's just that one key physical version of it that they're bound and determined to bring down. The rose thing is more vague because, like, I think they even mentioned, they're like, well, is it an actual version of the tower, or is it like some sort of doorway to get to the tower, or is it like, they still don't know what the rose is. And you look at the petals in the center of the rose and they see all the different universes in it and things like that. So like, and they see the faces and from all these different things. So like, the rose thing is very interesting.
So one last concept, and we got to end this thing, but we got to do more episodes where we just talk about, especially once I finish it, this type of stuff.
Right.
But the rose in the tower, it reminds me of, have you ever seen that Futurama episode where I can't remember how they discovered it, but there's like a universe in a box, and in that universe, their universe is in a box in that universe. Right. And then the 2 doctors at the end of the episode, they pull their arms through and they pull each other's boxes into their, so now there's a box in this universe that contains this universe. Right. That's how I think of the rose. The rose is just like this. It just is a box in this universe, but it contains all universes.
All universes.
And,
yeah.
And how it just does,
Right.
So
again, one of those things you just take on face value. Like,
yeah.
No explanation. This is it.
But all right. Well, let's end this thing.
All right. Well.
All right. Thanks for watching. See you next week.